It says, we are live, and we are. In fact, live your truth today. So, hello, everybody. How are y'all doing? So good to see you. Thank you for being a part of the journey. Bosto and Favor, um, lots of energy. I wrote to someone today, and I have a theory. It's evident, or they say that we now know, that we're in this galactic sheet. The Earth is, our solar system. Energies are off the scale. All of the planets are changing. The stars that are behind us, that where this thing came from, they've all nova, micronova, which means lots of energy. We're electrical beings, and energy in space typically is magnetic, electromagnetic plasma. So yeah. So anyway, so how is everybody? I'm just getting everyone so I can look at the chat room. David, my friend David Barry, sending you much love, brother, and gonna have David on probably next week. But sending you bunches and bunches of positive power. Be a deed like Bruce Lee. Let it flow over thee. Transmute. If negative energy is coming at you, eat it up, consume it, and you can literally transmute it. So anyway, Peter, I saw, brought his wife home from having I think nasal surgery. We just send you healing. Hey, Robert V, David Castle, sending you healing as well. Hello, I'm Amar. Good to see you. Susie Q, hello. How are you? David Castle. Balanca, hello. Kaz, how are you doing, dear? Is that coffee good? Huh? Joyce, are you serious? So good to see. Nina the Mystic has her show tonight, 8 p.m. my time. I think it's 10 p.m. East Coast. The Hump Day show. She does it live over on YouTube. So, yeah. Angela, good to see you. Drained. Yeah, I've been waking up tired, and that isn't like me. It's, what can I say? What can I say? Hey, Cranball Brian, how you doing? Darth, good to see you. And Candy Apple. Robert V, going to get you on here. I see you at noontime, so we're going to recruit you to come on. So just expect that. What else? Okay, let's get right to it. I want to make a disclaimer right here up front. It's amazing how conditioned human beings are. We're in the spooky season. October's Halloween. Everything is spooky. Everything is horror. Everything is, woo. That is all man's creation, just like this book here is man's creation. It's amazing how we do this. We're creative beings by our very nature. And so there is this heightened awareness now of the devil, Satan, dare I say Lucifer. For the record, I don't believe in him. Don't believe in the Jesus. Don't believe in Yahweh, the Elohim. If they exist, they're an alien race. Don't believe in Satan. Don't believe in Lucifer. There's a song in here, and I'm hearing on that. Blood, sweat, and tears. And when I die, and when I'm gone, there'll be one child born in the world to carry on. But anyway, these are all creations of man. All gods of all religions are false. They're creations of man. And that's just the way it is. Now, we can get all wrapped up into, belief systems. Hey, that's why they're created. And, no matter how much you study, and folks, I told Trina I would have to show her this. I told her, So I really meant it. This is my reference to volume set, the pseudo-apocrypha of the Old Testament, all the books that were thrown out. Why? Because the books they threw out validated that this was all made up. No foundation to any of this. No God has ever manifested before humanity, period. And the sooner that we can accept this, the sooner we get to move and progress forward. As long as we're chained down to old thoughts that no longer serve anything but the dead, we will be stuck with the dead. Life can only come when we rise above that which has held us down. So just to let you know, I wish Lucifer existed. Really do. I think it would be female. And the reason why I say that, because Lucifer is wisdom. And if you go back to the Hebraic teachings, Proverbs, wisdom is female. Said that she was at the foot of God as his sole companion. Now, that's very interesting because that gives the indication that wisdom is something of a tangible personification. Thus, if Lucifer did exist, I'll tell you, that would be winning the lottery for me. It would be a phenomenal opportunity. But since I don't see that happening anytime soon, we need to understand what we're dealing with. All of us have seen only one side of the story. Give me 1 second here. That's all we've seen. That's all we've heard. I was indoctrinated it for nearly 50 years. Became a minister of the gospel, preached the gospel. And the interesting thing in Bible college and through all the other rigmarole, no one really knew what the devil was. No one really knew who Satan was. There's ambiguity in abundance in the Bible because you really don't know what this being, creature, is. What we have heard are accusations from one side of the table. One, because it's written, it says that a word called itself God. Never proved it, never validated it. So it's just a claim. Now, this same being made the accusation against another being, that this other being was the sole reason for all the world's ills, for all of mankind's woes. Okay? And folks, I've read the book. It's amazing. When I made my declaration, I've had this Bible since 1982. I wrote in this, I said, Jesus is not my Lord, and Lord means ball. There never was a human being born with the name Jesus. I renounce this false God and all gods of this world, including this false deity. I wrote this back in May of 2018. Now, I know this book, folks. It's amazing. I kind of chuckle when I see people writing to me, trying to show their great knowledge as though I have no understanding of the Bible. I have a great deal of understanding about it. And again, it only makes a claim. There is a deity who calls itself God, who says it's a jealous, angry God. It says vengeance is his. It says it will be merciful for whom it decides to be merciful to, and shall show cruelty to who he shows cruelty to. Now, this is God, the God of Jesus. the Savior of the world. I still can't figure out what exactly Jesus is saving us from. But anyway, now this God says that there is this being that it created. It admits it. That carries out its destruction and judgment. That's what Satan is, from the Old Testament point of view. You could basically say from that point of view, it's God sitting on a throne that has Satan by the dog collar and on a leash, and he'll sick him on you if you don't obey him. Again, we have the Jesus saying that Satan is the father of all lies and that there is no truth in him. He was a liar from the beginning, quote unquote. We have no foundation of this, but yet we have the supposed meeting of the Jesus with the Satan, not Lucifer, not the devil, Satan, where Satan took him to the pinnacle in Jerusalem. You know, we know the 3 temptations. I'm going to read those temptations. It's all a play. It never happened. But humans are so, it's like when we go to see a movie, when we watch TV, listen to music, we are hypnotized, we're mesmerized. It's very easily how humans are led like that. So we still do not hear anything about the origin of this being. Now, there is a lot of assumptions going on. I've watched and lived them for over 45 years. And I can tell you, when you start assuming some shit, you're going to have shit all over you because it makes an ass out of you when you assume. And that's what much of the critics that write me do. They don't study. They only hear one side of the story, and that's the problem. Because if we take the modern era, we've had nothing but one side of the story for nearly, what? 8,000, 9,000 years? In the modern age, last 2,000 years? Never rebuttal. I have documented on many programs here, no one can show me in this Bible where Lucifer or Satan ever killed one individual, ever harmed a human. Now, people like to bring up Job. Go read that thing. It's wrong. Satan, the Satan, is an adversary by its literal term, small s, not capital S. But when the Roman Catholic Church and its false religion became what we know today is modern Christendom, they had to build up the antithesis. Otherwise, their story doesn't sell. So it brings us to where we are right now. We are now the jury, and we're about to hear the accused moment. Now, I brought us the first little part. I will continue to bring the part today, and then we'll maybe wrap this up by tomorrow. But this is for a disclaimer. I neither advocate nor discourage anyone who reads about Satan. You should read everything you can. And as much that he seems to be the one ruling the world. And at which you can take it one point of view that he's being attacked by an outside enemy called the Elohim. One point of view. But he's the devil. So let's listen to what he has to say on his defense. We are at the Book of Enlightenment. This is the Book of Lucifer, the Enlightenment. The Roman god, Lucifer, was the bearer of light, the spirit of the air, the personification of enlightenment. In Christian mythology, he became synonymous with evil, which was only to have been expected from a religion whose very existence is perpetrated by clouded definitions and bogus values. It is time to set the record straight. False moralism and occult inaccuracies must be corrected. Entertaining as they might be, most stories and plays about devil worship must be recognized as the obsolete absurdities they are. It has been said, the truth will make men free. The truth alone has never set anyone free. It is only doubt which will bring mental emancipation. Without the wonderful element of doubt, the doorway through which truth passes would be tightly shut, impervious to the most strenuous poundings of 1,000 Lucifers. How understandable that Holy Scripture should refer to the infernal monarch as the father of lies, a magnificent example of character inversion. If one is to believe this theological accusation that the devil represents falsehood, then it surely must be concurred that it is he, not God, that established all spiritual religions. Did you hear that? It is Satan, Lucifer, who is the God of every earthly religion. Otherwise, they don't exist. And who wrote all the holy Bibles. When one doubt is followed by another, the bubble, grown large from long accumulated fallacies, threatens to burst. For those who already doubt supposed truths, this book is revelation. Then Lucifer will have risen. Now is the time for doubt. The bubble of falsehood is bursting, and its sound is the roar of the world. Isn't it amazing? And I'm speaking of myself, how I readily accepted what they told me around the campfire about this bloodthirsty God who sacrificed its son because I, at the age of 12, was a worthless sinner bound for hell. A hell of a religion, isn't it? And that's where it starts. Because from then on, the rest of my 40 plus years in this religion was a torment. I neither knew what good or evil was, but all I knew is that I was evil. I was wrong. I was a sinner. Everything that I did on a natural basis was somehow a sin. That I, coming in as an innocent baby, at the very 1 second mark, was condemned to death before I even took a breath. What kind of a freaking maniac God is that? You could then say that this is hell. Wanted, God, dead or alive. It is a popular misconception that the Satanist does not believe in God. The concept of God, as interpreted by man, has been so varied throughout the ages that the Satanist simply accepts the definition which suits him best. Man has always created his gods, rather than his gods creating him. God is, to some, benign, to others, terrifying. To the Satanist, God, by whatever name he is called, or by no name at all, is seen as the balancing factor in nature, and not as being concerned with suffering. This powerful force, which permeates the balance of the universe, is far too impersonal to care about the happiness or misery of flesh and blood creatures on this ball of dirt upon which we live. Anyone who thinks of Satan as evil should consider all the men, women, and children and animals who have died because it was God's will. Certainly, a person grieving and ultimately loss of a loved one would much rather have their loved one with them than in God's hands. Instead, they are unconsciously consoled by the clergyman who says, "It was God's will, my dear," or "He's with God now, my son." Such phrases have been a convenient way of religionists to condone or excuse the mercilessness of God. But if God is in complete control and as benign as he is supposed to be, why does he allow these things to happen? Too long have religionists been falling back on their Bibles and rule books to prove or disprove, justify, condemn, or interpret. Break time. Break. Drink them if you got them. Great day. The Satanist realizes that man and the action and reaction of the universe is responsible for everything. And it doesn't mislead himself into thinking that someone cares. No longer will we sit back and accept fate without doing anything about it. Just because it says so in such chapter, and such, Psalm so and so, and that's that. And trust me, that's how it is. The Satanist knows that praying does absolutely no good. In fact, it actually lessens the chance of success. For the devoutly religious too often sit back complacently and pray for situations which, if they were to do something about it on their own, could have been accomplished much quicker. The Satanist shuns terms such as hope and prayer, as they are indicative of apprehension. If we hope and pray for something to come about, we will not act in a positive way which will make it happen. Satanist, realizing that anything he gets is of his own doing, takes command of the situation instead of praying to a God for it to happen. Positive thinking and positive action add up to results. Just as the Satan does not pray to God for assistance, he does not pray for forgiveness for his wrongdoings. In other religions, when one commits a wrong, he either prays to God for forgiveness or confesses to an intermediary and asks him to pray to God for forgiveness for his sins. The Satanist knows that praying does no good. Confessing to another human being like himself accomplishes even less and is furthermore degrading. When a Satanist commits a wrong, he realizes that it's natural to make a mistake. And if he is truly sorry about what he has done, he will learn from it and take care not to do the same thing again. If he is not honestly sorry about what he has done and knows he will do the same thing over and over, he has no business confessing and asking forgiveness in the first place. But that is exactly what happens. People confess their sins so that they can clear their consciousness and be free to go out and sin again, usually the same sin. There are many different interpretations of God in the usual sense of the word, as there are types of people. The images run from a belief in a God who is some vague sort of universal cosmic mind to an anthropomorphic deity with a long white beard and sandals who keeps track of every action of each individual. Even within the confines of a given religion, the personal interpretation of God differs greatly. Some religions actually go so far as to label anyone who belongs to a religious sect other than their own as a heretic, even though the overall doctrines and impressions of godliness are nearly the same. For example, the Catholics believe that the Protestants are doomed to hell simply because they do not belong to the Catholic Church. In the same way, many splinter groups of the Christian faith, such as the evangelical or revivalist churches, believe that the Catholics are heathens who worship graven images. Christ is depicted in the image that is most psychologically akin to the individual worshiping him. And yet the Christians criticize heathens for worship of graven images. And the Jews have always been given the devil's name. Ain't this the truth? We're all devils. Even though the God in all of these religions is basically the same, each regard the way chosen by the others as reprehensible. And on top of all that, religionists actually pray for one another. They have sworn for the brothers of the right-hand path because their religions carry different labels. And somehow this animosity must be released. What better way than through prayer? What a simplely polite way of saying, I hate your freaking guts. This is the thin disguised device known as praying for your enemies. Praying for one's own enemy is nothing more than bargain basement anger. and of a decidedly shoddy and inferior quality. If there has been so much violent discrepancy as to the proper way in which to worship God, how many different interpretations of God can there be? And who is right? All devout white lighters are concerned with pleasing God, so that they might have the pearly gates open for them when they die. Nevertheless, if a man has not lived his life in accordance with the regulations of his faith, he can be at the last minute call a clergyman to his deathbed for a final absolution. The priest or minister will then come running on the double to make everything right with God and to see to it that his passport to the heavenly realm is in order. The Yazira, the sect of devil worshippers, take a different viewpoint. They believe that God is all powerful, but also all forgiving, and so accordingly feel that it is the devil whom they must please, as he is the one who rules their lives while here on earth. They believe so strongly that God will forgive all of their sins once they have been given the last rites, that they feel no need to concern themselves with the opinion God may hold of them while they live here. Wow. Heavy stuff, isn't it? You're the jury. Be open-minded. You've never read this. You don't know what the devil or Satan or Lucifer has to say in its defense. So keep an open mind. You've only heard the Christian point of view. Limited degree, the Catholics, Islam, and Hindu is a different one altogether. With all the contradictions in Christian scriptures, many people currently cannot rationally accept Christianity the way it has been practiced in the past. Great numbers of people are beginning to doubt the existence of God in the established Christian sense of the word. So, they have taken to calling themselves Christian atheists. True, the Christian Bible is a mass of contradictions, but what could be more contradictory than the term Christian atheist? If prominent leaders of the Christian faith are rejecting the past interpretations of God, how then can their followers be expected to adhere to previous religious tradition? Listen, today, most Catholics would be excommunicated. Most Christian Protestants would have been already, how shall we say, put to the sword. That's how conversion to Christianity worked. There was no peaceful negotiation. It was a notification, and it was only one way. With all the debates about whether or not God is dead, if he isn't, he had better have Medicare. The God you save may be yourself. All religions of a spiritual nature are inventions of man. He has created an entire systems of gods with nothing more than his carnal brain. Just because he has an ego and cannot accept it, he has to externalize it in some great spiritual device, which he calls God. God can do all the things man is forbidden to do, such as kill people, perform miracles to gratify his will, control without any apparent responsibility. See, that is my point. My critics who write me these letters, they cannot deal with the fact that when I show them in their scripture, their Bible, their God is a murderer, rapist, who is into the sex slave trade. That's how it started. And how can you be a merciful God, Jesus, when your father told its followers to cut fetuses out of living women's wombs? No. No. If man needs such a God and recognizes that God, then he is worshiping an entity that a human being invented. Therefore, he is worshiping by proxy the man that invented God. Is it not more sensible to worship a God that he himself has created in accordance with his own emotional needs? One of the best represents the very carnal and physical being that has the idea power to invent a God. Isn't it amazing what we invent, and then we actually give life to it in some ethereal form out there? And I know this is just crushing lots of people's perceptions of what being awoke even means. If man insists on externalizing his true self in the form of God, then why fear his true self in fearing God? Why praise his true self in praising God? Why remain externalized from God in order to engage in ritual and religious ceremony in his name? Man needs ritual and dogma, but no law states that an externalized God is necessary in order to engage in ritual and ceremony performed in a God's name. Could it be that when he closes the gap between himself and his God, he sees the demon of pride creeping forth, that very embodiment of Lucifer appearing in his midst? He can no longer can he view himself in two parts, the carnal and the spiritual, but sees them merge as one. And then, to his absolute horror, discovers that they are only the carnal and always were. Then he either hates himself to death day by day or rejoices that he is what he is. Folks, this is about as common sense, real as you can get it. I tell you, I've never been freer. I love myself now. When I was in Christianity, the guilt was more than I could physically bear at times. Why? Because if you were, let's say, using God's name in vain, God damn, poop, man, it's a big one. You best get on your freaking knees, boy. And the thing about it is, each Sunday when I went to the pulpit, as Laverne said, pulpit, why, even if you didn't feel bad about yourself, by the end of the ritual ceremony, you do. Because you're bowing your head and asking, oh, God, forgive me. Oh, God, I saw that woman with the big breast. Oh, man. Does that mean I'm lusting? You get the idea? It is the cruelest form of mind control I know of. And it's just a fact. When in reality, why am I taught to hate myself in that doctrine? Why am I not taught to be proud of myself? There's only one in me. I'm unique. I'm special. And no matter what the rest of the world says, I'm good. I see myself. What a lovely spirit. My, yeah, we don't see that. If this is Satan speaking or Lucifer, these are some of the wisest words you'll probably ever hear. If he hates himself, man, he searches out new and more complex spiritual paths of enlightenment in hopes that he may split himself up again in his quest for stronger and more externalized gods to scour his poor miserable shell. If he accepts himself, but recognizes that ritual and ceremony are the important devices that his invented religions have utilized to sustain his faith in a lie, then it is the same form of ritual that will sustain his faith in the truth. The primitive pageantry, that will give his awareness of his own majestic being adding substance. The pageantry of all of us. When you get up in the morning, you should hear trumpets going off. You should see fireworks exploding because you're a living being. You have a mind and the capacity that many in the ether envy. And that's why they've been feeding off of us, deluding us. I've seen no God come to the rescue of man at any time. None. If the Christian God exists, where did it come from? They don't want to accept the Jehovah part, the Yahweh part. Oh, no, that's not our God. Well, then where the hell did he come from? We debate love, hate. What is love? You can't define any love. It's an emotion. Yeah. It's an energy. Yep. That's all it is, energy. And in this density, in this realm, it's polarized. You activate the polarization of love, then you're going to continue activating that energy. Hate's the same way. And it's amazing the contradiction that you fall in. Well, you're not supposed to hate anyone. Well, if I brought up to a Sunday service and say, I have wanted to talk to Lucifer. Oh my God. We hate him. He's our mortal enemy. But wait a minute. Book says I'm supposed to love my enemy. Not like that. When all religious faith in lies is waned, it is because man has become closer to himself and further from God, closer to the devil. If this is what the devil represents, remember the antithesis, the yin and the yang. God and the devil have been having sex for a long time. Well, that's going to get some people fired up. It's true. If this is what the devil represents and a man's lives his life in the devil's vein, with the sinews of Satan moving in his flesh, then he either escapes from the cracklings and the carpings of the righteous, or stands proudly in his secret places of the earth, and manipulates the folly-ridden masses through his own satanic might, until that day when he may come forth in splendor proclaiming, I am a Satanist. Bow down, for I am the highest embodiment of human life. How many of the politicians today, think about this, rock concerts, what's happening here? We're bowing down. We're giving our energy. But there is an exchange for that. All right, let's continue. Some evidence of a new satanic age. The 7 deadly sins of the Christian church are greed, pride, envy, anger, gluttony, lust, and sloth. Satanism advocates indulging in each of these sins, as they all lead to physical, mental, and emotional gratification. Why is it that it is so wrong to gratify the flesh? No, I'm not going to do that. I'm ascending, brother. I'm ascending above the material needs of this world. Bullshit. You got to eat, keep the lights on, keep the heat, air conditioning on. I wish it was just that away, but it's not. The weights of daily life weigh down our souls. It's just the way it is. We're in a density of matter here. This realm is a dense realm. A Satanist knows there is nothing wrong with being greedy, as it only means that he wants more than he already has. Envy means to look with favor upon the possessions of others and to be desirous of obtaining similar things for oneself. Envy and greed are the motivating forces of ambition, and without ambition, very little of any importance would be accomplished. Boom, baby. Let's get honest with ourselves. Ooh, we don't like this. It needs to be heard. Here is Satan's, Lucifer's defense. Gluttony is simply eating more than you need to keep yourself alive. When you have overeaten to the point of being obese, another sin, pride, will motivate you to regain an appearance that will renew your self-respect. Well, Satan, I got to tell you something. We went as mankind and screwed up the food. Yeah, the natural stuff. And now it's so heavily processed that you're going to get fat if you eat it. Satan would probably say, then don't eat it. Anyone who buys an article of clothing for a purpose other than covering his body or her body and protecting it from the elements is guilty of pride. How many times have us men sat while we've taken our wives, if you were dating, you ever gone clothes shopping? Beat me, please. And that's why they've got mirrors all in those places. Why? Because you want to strut your stuff, baby. You want to look good. It's nothing like getting a new dress, new suit. Man, you're looking good and you're feeling good. That's a sin in some religious beliefs. Satanists often encounter scoffers who maintain that labels are not necessary. It must be pointed out to these destroyers of labels that one of the many articles they themselves are not necessary to keep them warm. There is not a person on this earth who is completely devoid of ornamentation. The Satanist points out that any ornamentation of the scoffer's body shows that he or she too is guilty of pride, regardless of how verbose the cynic may be in his intellectual description of how free he is still wearing the elements of pride. We're coming up on Christmas, the stress time. Got to buy a gift, got to buy a gift, got to buy a gift. And you want to see the devils come out? Look on Christmas morning. Being reluctant to get up in the morning is to be guilty of sloth. And if you lie in bed long enough, you may find yourself committing yet another sin, lust. To have the faintest stirring of sexual desire is to be guilty of lust. In order to ensure that the propagation of humanity, nature made lust the second most powerful instinct, the first being self-preservation. Realizing this, the Christian church made fornication the original sin. In this way, they made sure no one would escape sin. Your very state of being is as a result of sin, the original sin. The strongest instinct in every living thing is self-preservation, which brings us to the last of the 7 deadly sins, anger. Is it not our instinct for self-preservation that is aroused when someone harms us? When we become angry enough to protect ourselves from further attack? Satan practices the motto, if a man smite thee on one cheek, smash him on the other. Let no wrong go unaddressed. Be as a lion in the path, be dangerous even in defeat. Folks, I grew up on the street. I wish it was this peace and love that we were all wearing and proclaiming. The street is still, it's a jungle, a human-made jungle. Yeah. Since man's natural instincts lead him to sin, all men are sinners, and all sinners go to hell. If everyone goes to hell, then you will meet all your friends there. Heaven must be populated with some rather strange creatures if they all live was to go to a place where they can strum harps for eternity. I've thought about this many times. They don't tell you what you're going to do in heaven. The devil is in the details. Steiger cracked me up. All right. Times have changed. Religious leaders no longer preach that all our natural actions are sinful. We no longer think sex is dirty or that taking pride in ourselves is shameful. Listen, if you wash your body, it could be considered an act of pride. Or that wanting something someone else has is vicious. Of course not. times have changed. If you want proof of this, just look at how liberal churches have become. Why? They're practicing all the things that you preach. I mean, there are certain religious Christian churches that now have gays in the pulpit. 50 years ago, that would be an abomination not tolerated by anyone. Yeah, times are changing. Satanists hear these and similar statements all the time, and they agree wholeheartedly. But if the world has changed so much, why continue to grasp at the threads of a dying faith? If many religions are denying their own scriptures because they are out of date and are preaching the philosophies of Satanism, why not call it for what its rightful name is? Satanism. Certainly, it would be far less hypocritical. That's a shock, isn't it? That in many churches today, they are preaching Satanism. They would never admit to that, but they are. In fact, they have more faith in Satan than they do Jesus or God. They fear Satan more than they fear Jesus or their God. Why is it the Catholic Church prays to Lucifer and says and worships Lucifer and admits that Jesus is Lucifer's son? Something's wrong here. In recent years, there have been an attempt to humanize the spiritual concept of Christianity. This has manifested itself in the most obvious non-spiritual means. Masses, which had been said in Latin, are now said in native languages, which only succeeds in making the nonsense easier to understand, and at the same time robs the ceremony of the esoteric nature which is consistent with the tenets of the dogma. It is much simpler to obtain an emotional reaction using words and phrases that cannot be understood than it is with statements which even the simplest minds will question when hearing them in an understandable language. If priests and ministers were to use the device to fill their churches 100 years ago that they were to use today, they would have been charged with heresy, called devils, oft times persecuted, but certainly excommunicated without hesitation. The religionists wail, "We must keep up with the times," forgetting that, due to the limiting factors and deeply ingrained laws of the white light religions, there can never be sufficient change to meet the needs of man. Past religions have always represented the spiritual nature of man, with little or no concern for his carnal or mundane needs. They have considered this life but transitory, and the flesh merely a shell, physical pleasures, trivial, and pain a worthwhile preparation for the kingdom of God. How well the utter hypocrisy comes forth when the righteous make a change in their religion to keep up with man's natural change. The only way that Christianity can ever completely serve the needs of man is to become as Satanists are now. Let that sink in. It has become necessary for a new religion based on man's natural instincts to come forth. They have named it. It's called Satanism. It is that power condemned that has caused the religious controversy over birth control measures, a disgruntled admission that sexual activity for fun is here to stay. It is the devil who caused women to show their legs, to titillate men, the same kind of legs now socially acceptable to gaze upon, which were revealed by young nuns as they walked about in their shoulder shortened habits. Excuse me. What a delightful step in the right or left direction. It is possible we will see topless nuns sensually throwing their bodies about to the miscellaneous rock. Satan smiles and says he would like that fine. Many nuns are very pretty girls with nice legs. Many churches with some of the largest congregations have the most hand-clapping, sensual music, which is also satanically inspired. After all, The devil has always had the best tunes. Folks, there were times and during the early 2000s, the mega churches, and I know this very intimately, some churches spent literally millions of dollars a year on the theatrical aspect of their religion. Why? The people were not coming. There was and is still this exodus. And when you began to see the dancing, the rock music, the rock bands that are now in many of these churches, uh, I went to one and I had to walk out because the music was, if you want to say that there is satanic music, what they were playing in the sanctuary would have been an insult to Satan. But my point is, this 50 years ago would have been blasphemy. Church picnics, despite all of Aunt Martha's talk about the Lord's bountiful harvest, are nothing more than a good excuse for Sunday gluttony. And everyone knows that lots more than Bible reading goes on the bushes. First time I felt a girl's breast was at a church function, when I really learned wow, that was an awakening. At a Christian youth camp that I went, had great sex up there. Yeah. Oh, we went by the campfires and, all the Bibles sung, what have you. But there was more courtesy taking place in these religious get-togethers than we all know. The fundraising adjunct to many church bazaars is commonly known as a carnival, which used to mean the celebration of the flesh. Just like Easter is the celebration of the goddess of prostitutes. Now a carnival is okay because the money goes to the church so that it can preach against the temptations of the devil. It will be said that these things are only pagan devices and ceremonies, and that the Christians borrowed them. True, but the pagans reveled in the delights of the flesh and were condemned by the very same people who celebrate their rituals, but call them by different names. Priests and ministers are in the front lines of peace demonstrations and laying on the railroad tracks in front of trains carrying war materials, which is much dedication as their brothers of the cloth from the same seminaries, who are blessing the bullets and the bombs and finding men as chaplains in the armed forces. Now, wait a minute. You got one guy here who's saying, I ain't letting that train go by full of ammunition. This is against God's will. But I got another guy who was my brother in seminary who's up there blessing the troops, saying, go kill them all. And let me bless in holy water this ammunition. Is that crazy? Whew. Someone must be wrong someplace. Could it be that Satan is the one qualified to act as the accuser? Certainly, they named him that. When a puppy reaches maturity, it becomes a dog. When ice melts, it is called water. When 12 months have passed and have been used up, we get a new calendar with the proper chronological name. When magic becomes scientific fact, we refer to it as medicine, astronomy, etc. When one name is no longer appropriate for a given thing, it is only logical to change it to a new one which better fits the subject. Why then do we not follow suit in the area of religion? Why continue to call a religion the same name when its tenets of that religion no longer fit the original one? Or if religion does preach the same things that it has always has, but its followers practice nearly none of its teachings, why do they continue to call themselves by the given name to followers of that religion? If you do not believe in what your religion teaches, why continue to support the belief which is contradictory to your feelings? You would never vote for a person or issue you did not believe in. So why cast your eschatological vote for a religion which is not consistent with your convictions? You have no right to complain about a political situation you have voted for or supported in any way, which includes sitting back and complacently agreeing with neighbors who approve the situation, just because you are too lazy or cowardly to speak your mind. So it is with religious balloting. Even if you cannot be aggressively honest about your opinions because of unfavorable consequences from employers, community leaders, etc., you can at least be honest with yourself. In the privacy of your own home, with close friends, you must support religion which has your best interests at heart. Satanism is based on a sound philosophy, says the emancipated. But why call it Satanism? Why not call it something like humanism, or a name that would have the connotation of a witchcraft group, something a little more esoteric, something less blatant? There is more than one reason for this. Humanism is not a religion. It is simply a way of life with no ceremony or dogma. Satanism has both ceremony and dogma. Dogma, as well will be explained, is necessary. Satanism differs greatly from all other so-called white witchcraft, or magical groups in the world today. These self-righteous, superfluous religious protest that their members use the power of magic only for altruistic purposes. Satanists look with disdain upon white witchcraft groups because they feel that the altruism is sinning on a layaway plan. It is unnatural not to have desire to gain things for yourself. Satanism represents a form of controlled selfishness. This does not mean that you never do anything for anyone else. If you do something to make someone from whom you care happy, his happiness will give you a sense of gratification. Satanism advocates practicing a modified form of the Golden Rule. Our interpretation of this rule is do unto others as they have done unto you. Because if you do unto others as you would have them do unto you, they in turn treat you badly. It goes against human nature to continue to treat them with consideration. You should do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But if your courtesy is not returned, they should be treated with the wrath they deserve. White witchcraft groups say that if you curse a person, it will return to you threefold, come home to roost, or in some way boomerang back to the sender. This is yet another indication of the guilt-ridden philosophy which is held by those neo-pagan pseudo-Christian groups. White witches want to delve into witchcraft, but cannot divorce themselves from the stigma attached to it. Therefore, they call themselves white magicians and base 75% of their philosophy on the tripe and hackneyed tenets of Christianity. Anyone who pretends to be interested in magic or the occult for reasons other than gaining personal power is the worst kind of hypocrite. The Satan respects Christianity for, at least, being consistent in its guilt-ridden philosophy, but can only feel contempt for the people who attempt to appear emancipated from guilt by joining a witchcraft group and then practice the same basic philosophy as Christianity. White magic is supposedly utilized for only for good or unselfish purposes. And black magic, we are told, is used only for selfish or evil reasons. Satanism draws no such dividing line. Magic is magic, be it used to help or hinder. The Satanist, being the magician, should have the ability to decide what is just and then apply the powers of magic to obtain his goals. During white magical ceremonies, the practitioners stand within a pentagram to protect themselves from the evil forces which they call upon for help. To the Satanists, it seems a bit two-faced to call on these forces for help while at the same time protecting yourself from the very powers you have asked for assistance. The Satanist realizes that only by putting himself in league with these forces can be fully and unhypocritically utilized the power of darkness to his best advantage. In a Satanist magical ceremony, the participants do not join hands and dance around the rosy in a circle, burn candles for various colors for various wishes, call out the names of Father, Son, and Holy Ghost while supposedly practicing black arts, pick a saint for their personal guide in obtaining help for their problems, dunk themselves in smelly oils and hope the money comes in. meditate so that they can arrive at a great spiritual awakening, recite long incantations with the names of Jesus thrown in for good measure between every few words, etc., 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 ad nauseum. Because this is not the way to practice satanic magic. If you cannot divorce yourself from the hypocritical self-deceit, you will never be successful as a magician, much less a Satanist. The satanic religion is not merely has not merely lifted the coin, it has flipped it completely over. Therefore, why should it support the very principle to which it is completely opposed by calling itself anything other than the name which is totally in keeping with the reverse doctrines which make up the satanic philosophy? Satanism is not a white light religion. It is a religion of the flesh, the mundane, the carnal, all of which are ruled by Satan, the personification of the left-hand path. Inevitably, the next question asked is, granted, you can't call it humanism because humanism is not a religion, but why even have a religion in the first place if all you do is what comes naturally anyway? Why just do it? Why not just do it? Modern man has come a long way. He has become disenchanted with the nonsensical dogmas of past religions. We are living in an enlightened age. Psychiatry has made the greatest strides in enlightening man about his true personality. We are living in an era of intellectual awareness unlike any the world has ever seen. There are very well and good. This is all very well and good, but there is one flaw in this new state of awareness. It is one thing to accept something intellectually, but to accept the same thing emotionally is an entirely different matter. The one need that psychiatry cannot feel is man's inherent need for emotionalizing through dogma. Man needs ceremony and ritual, fantasy, and enchantment. Psychiatry, despite all the good it has done, has robbed man of wonder and fantasy, which religion in the past has provided. Satanism, realizing the current needs of man, fills the large gray void between religion and psychiatry. The satanic philosophy combines the fundamentals of psychology and good, honest emotionalizing or dogma. It provides man with his much needed fantasy. There is nothing wrong with dogma, providing it is not based on ideas and actions which go completely against human nature. The quickest way of traveling between 2 points is a straight line. If all the guilts that have been built up can be turned into advantages, it eliminates the need for an intellectual purging of the psyche in an attempt to cleanse it from these repressions. Satanism is the only religion known to man that accepts man as he is and promotes the rational of turning a bad thing into a good thing rather than bending over backwards to eliminate the bad thing. Therefore, after intellectually evaluating your problems through common sense and drawing on what psychiatry has taught us, if you still cannot emotionally release yourself from unwarranted guilt and put your theories into action, then you should learn to make your guilt work for you. You should act upon your natural instincts, and then, if you cannot perform without feeling guilty, revel in your guilt. This may sound like contradiction in terms, but if you will think about it, guilt can often add a flip to the senses. Adults would do well to take a lesson from children. Children often take great delight in doing something they know they are not supposed to do. Yes, times have changed, but man hasn't. The basics of Satanism have always existed. The only thing that is new is the formal organization of religion based on the universal traits of man. For centuries, magnificent structures of stone, concrete, mortar, and steel have been devoted to man's abstinence. It is high time that human beings stop fighting themselves and devote their time to building temples designated for man's indulgences. Even though times have changed, and always will, man remains basically the same. For 2,000 years, man has done penance for something he never should have had to feel guilty about in the first place. We are tired of denying ourselves the pleasures of life which we deserve. Today, as always, man needs to enjoy himself here and now instead of waiting for his rewards in heaven. So why not have a religion based on one indulgence? Certainly, based on indulgence. Certainly, it is consistent with the nature of the beast. We are no longer supplicating weaklings trembling before an unmerciful God who cares not whether we live or die. We are self-respecting, prideful people. We are Satanists. Well, boom. Woo. And yet, I can assure you there will be those who watch this who cannot, number one, admit that they are addicted to guilt, and two, will reject every word of this because of simply the name Satan. They don't want the truth. They like living in a lie. Poverty has been blamed on the devil. Disease has been blamed on the devil. All the ills of man's society has been blamed on Satan. When in fact, where the true blame resides is on the Christian God. These other gods of the world, these are all enslavers. They all reject man, the very thing that they created, or so it says. But yet here you have a creature who says, you are what you are. I can accept that. Can you? And the answer for most people is they can't. And their bigotry will continue. Their biasness, they'll reject this because no one wants to hear what Satan has to say. But yet, when you read the words, pretty heavy stuff. I'm just trying to see what's happening. Everything else. Okay, so yeah. Well, give me your comments. I'm sure I'll hear from a few of them. The first one got a few, but folks, it's time for us to have an open conversation. I mean, why is it that certain topics are so taboo that they can't be discussed in an open public forum? Again, I wish Lucifer existed. I really do. At least I know that his nature is all wisdom. I don't know about the rest of these deities because they really seem to make a lot of mistakes. They really do. Oh, that's why. It's because they were made by man. All right, folks. Thank you. Thank you. I hope that, I hope that this was something. I don't know if we're still, it says we're still live, so I'm expecting we are. I'm just trying to read in the chat room. Well, looks like, yeah. Well, I'll see you tomorrow. Make sure to check out Nina. I know Friday, I still haven't heard if the Andromeda 7 are going, but we'll make that. Then Friday, we have card reading day. And next week, I want to get David Barry on here and a few others. And I'd like to, there's a lot we can discuss now. I think once we get through this book, and it's not that big, I have all three of his books, His notes are very interesting. I have to say this guy had a lot of common sense. It's interesting because now they print their Bible almost like the same that you see in the Christian Bibles. And they have a whole complete thing of rituals. If you're into rituals, then it's kind of like adult masquerade costume party, it's interesting. And we'll continue. We're going to read the book, and then we'll move on. But at least we can say that someone gave like they never gave Lilith. I'm still the only one who's ever read the Liber Lilith. I gave Lilith her opportunity to speak her side of the story. Now it's time that we hear Satan's side of the story and see what he has to say about it. And it's interesting. It's going to be challenging, but I think once we break through, we have a better handle on this. All right, folks, be good to yourself. I will see you later. I hope I am still seeing myself. No, it doesn't even show me as live. All right, folks, I don't know. They may have cut me off.